physical film, physical paper, dark room, all of that, and actually made money taking pictures of the school play and the kids in the play that wanted to have pictures of, their role, et cetera. And so that ended up paying for a summer camp for me to go to, a couple of summers, et cetera. So kind of early on, it was money's helpful, money's important, and you can make money. And frankly, I probably had an allowance, but I don't remember that lasting very long. I was responsible for, if I wanted to do something, I needed to get the money to do it.
Hey, it's Rocky. Welcome to Richer Soul. Today's guest is Steve Anderson, who wrote the book, The Bezos Letters, 14 Principles to Grow Your Business Like Amazon.
Imagine it's 12 months from now, and you've achieved your major life goals. How does it feel to be in the best shape of your life? To wake up energized, excited about the day? To have great relationships and friends who support you and propel you forward? How does it feel to have an excess of money, to be able to make the choices you want? To be fearless and open to trying new adventures? Imagine being connected to the universe and it providing everything you desire. It's possible over time, and your past does not dictate your future. The only thing holding you back from this vision is you. It's time to take control of our thoughts and use them to our advantage. Welcome to Richer Soul, where we achieve our dreams and bring balance to health, wealth, relationships, time, and spirituality. If you have not had a chance to listen to episodes 1 through 9, I encourage you to go back and listen to the framework behind Richer Soul and how to create the life of your dreams. You can also find all the show notes for this episode at richersoul.com.
We're going to start today with a quote from Jeff Bezos. In the end, we are our choices. Build yourself a great story. Are you doing that? Are you also then constantly evolving? What does that look like? I will come back to that after we chat with Steve. But the reality is you get to pick your story. Let's face it, change is moving faster and faster, and you have to decide if you want to stay relevant. Some paths have an end date, while others are never ending. For example, if you choose to be a football player, you have an end date pretty early in life, at least with playing the game. But if you choose another path, you can keep improving and learning till the day you die. I don't know how old you can still play golf at. I don't know how old the oldest golfer is. While we're going to talk today about Amazon and the principles and lessons that we learn apply to your life, as you hear about them, think about how you can incorporate them in the way that you live, thrive, and grow. Our guest today, Steve Anderson, is the co-founder and CEO of Catalyst, the insurance agency technology resource company backed by 24 Big One state associations. He helps busy insurance agency owners maximize their tech and discover, evaluate, and select and implement new tools they need to continue to thrive. He is also the author of the best-selling book, The Bezos Letters, 14 Principles to Grow Your Business Like Amazon. Let's meet Steve and learn about those principles. Welcome to Richer Soul, Steve Anderson. It's great to have you join us today.
Rocky, what a pleasure to be a guest on your show. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
As am I, excited to learn from you. We always like to start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
Well, I think I would say obviously a lot. Grew up, I have an older brother and sister. We moved various places due to my dad's being transferred. And I actually started pretty early doing typical things to make extra money, mowing lawns, those kinds of things. Even to the point in high school, I got an interest in photography. Now, again, you might, surmise that that's been a few years ago, which it has. So, physical film, physical paper, dark room, all of that, and actually made money taking pictures of the school play and the kids in the play that wanted to have pictures of their role, etc. And so that ended up paying for a summer camp for me to go to a couple of summers, etc. So kind of early on, it was money's helpful, money's important, and you can make money. And frankly, I probably had an allowance, but I don't remember that lasting very long. I was responsible for if I wanted to do something, I needed to get the money to do it.
Interesting. I used to have a darkroom when I was a kid because my dad was big into photography.
Yeah.
So you kind of got invested in that. It was all black and white, though, because color at home was a different game.
It really was. And I tried it. I experimented with actually doing color. And, you have to be somewhat precise with black and white, but color is really precise, temperature and timing and all of that kind of stuff. And my color pictures never turned out very well. So I didn't pursue that very long.
It's funny to think how far the world has come in the sense of now, digital pictures and anyone can be perfect.
You take hundreds of pictures, not 30 in a roll, a film, right? I mean, it's just such a different mindset today. That's an interesting kind of technology story that we might get into later.
Yeah, we can talk about Kodak and what happened to them because that was, a big major issue. Out of curiosity, so what was it that kind of drove you to that entrepreneurship or that desire to go do that? Because that's not normal.
I think part of it was practical. I wanted to do summer trip. I wanted to buy a camera. And so I needed money to do that. So, and my parents, we were not poor. We were well off. They helped a lot. And I guess I just wanted to do a lot of it on my own and be a bit more self-sufficient. And that even carried into college. So worked on the yearbook, actually worked for the university I went to, taking pictures. So it kind of continued and just became a part of what I do and who I am.
So at some point, though, you shifted out of the picture taking business.
I did. And actually that story, I'll do a short version of it. So graduated college, got married between our junior and senior year of college, moved back to the Washington, D.C. area where we both grew up, and kind of still was taking pictures. And so started taking wedding pictures and kind of built a little business and made contacts with some florists and some others that I'd get referrals from. And one of the weddings was a late morning, early afternoon wedding. It was literally probably a 10-minute wedding. And so then everybody went to where the reception was going to be and got there probably 45 minutes early. So the reception area wasn't quite ready. They opened the bar and everybody got drunk, bottom line, including the bride, who spilt a Bloody Mary down the front of her white dress. So my wife and I, who was helping me, literally spent hours trying to get pictures that didn't show the red stain on the white wedding dress. And we decided at that point, what we were making was not worth it. So we pretty much stopped.
That was a pretty big aha.
Yes. It just, the time, the aggravation, all of that. So
then what happened?
Gosh, what happened? I actually worked for the United States Postal Service. I was a mailman during summers in college and then continued that when I got back to the DC area for probably 6 months. And then my father-in-law owned an independent insurance agency. And he actually had a massive stroke that summer that we've moved back and literally lost the complete right side of his used arm and leg. We didn't know if he was going to survive. He did, fortunately. And I then came in. We kind of agreed I would come in to help him out in his agency for a short period of time, year, maybe 2 years. That turned into almost now over a 40-year career in the industry. I ended up working for him for 13 years, and family dynamics were a bit much for me. So I decided to leave and kind of went out on my own. That's when I first started consulting in that agency. I had gotten really enamored with and really enjoyed the technology. So brought computers in for the first time and all kinds of things that I did. I kind of took that and then pivoted to more of a consulting role with other insurance agencies that were starting to add computers into their operation, didn't know what to do and how to install them and how to use them, how to train people on them. So that's I kind of started that movement into consulting.
It's funny. If you're lucky enough to catch the beginning of a big wave, you can ride it for a lifetime.
You can. Well, and so I left his agency, started doing a little consulting. We moved to the Dallas-Fort Worth area because my wife actually got a job offer there. I ended up going to work with an independent agency in literally down the street from me. And one of the things I really liked is they approached technology eagerly, meaning a lot of agencies don't want it, it don't need it. Certainly at that time, still somewhat today, but they did not. They were exploring, they were trying new things, et cetera. And I really liked that environment. So that gave me another 9 years of hands-on work. And then I started telling other agents what we were doing. And then that led me to speaking career, more focused consulting on the technology piece. And so I started my own business in 1999. And then we moved actually to where I am now, just outside Nashville, Tennessee, because my wife doesn't like heat. And so Texas in the summer is not the place to be.
My daughter's in Texas, and originally you're like, oh, we'll come down there. And then I looked at the map and I'm like, no, thank you. Nope. That is a little too hot for me.
That's exactly right.
And throughout this time, technology has dramatically changed. And at the same time, technology's changed. In some senses, technology has wiped out companies and changed the landscape dramatically. We kind of started with Kodak, and I just find it odd that Kodak invented the digital camera and couldn't commercialize it in the sense like.
Yes. And I think so those companies, BlackBerry, Kodak, Sears, Borders, there's a whole handful of companies that once were extremely successful and literally are no longer here. And so that question that you just asked, kind of how did that happen or whatever. And I think with Kodak, a lot of people say, they couldn't catch the vision for the digital camera. And I think it was more than that. I think that was part of it. And they literally did invent the digital camera. It was a box kind of thing. The problem is their entire business was based on a business model that couldn't shift to a digital focus. They almost had to go out of business. Either they had to put themselves out of business and reinvent themselves, or as what happened, people shifted away from film into digital, and other companies, Instagram, et cetera, came along and were able to monetize that digital piece, but it was a completely different model. And that's a really hard pivot to make. And I keep going back to Clay Christensen's book, The Innovator's Dilemma. And I think that's a real example of that. But frankly, those types of companies is what kind of spurred the question that I started asking, which is the biggest risk agencies face, that was the original thought, is the biggest risk agencies face actually not taking enough risk? Meaning, new technologies continuing to come at them. In the late 90s and early 2000s, the internet. And again, I remember the naysayers. This is nothing. It's a fad. It's not going to be anything, except look at it now. And by the way, I do make a connection to those days to our generative AI conversation today. I'm becoming convinced it's a similar type of technology that will have significant impact in the future. We just don't know what that's going to be right now. But as I examined those companies, and I looked at a lot of them, I also looked at companies that have been successful and continue to be successful and really wondered, what's the difference? What is it that allows a company to continue to be successful and continue to grow and not fall into that, what actually, I just lost his name. Jim Collins, in his book, Good to Great, calls the doom loop, where they start going down and they cannot turn around and come back. And then they make Hail Mary bets, and they just keep getting deeper and deeper in a hole. So I'll stop there. I know that was a lot.
No, and I think and I don't know Kodak's story, but I know corporate America's story, which is you get arrogant and you get afraid, and nobody is willing to risk the change, and they're almost blind to the outcome that's about to smack them in the face.
Exactly.
And some of those things happen rather quickly. And as you were speaking, I was thinking of Netflix. So Netflix started as a DVD mailing company. Then they became a streaming company. And then they became a production company. And in the midst of that, they had Roku, and they go, throw this out. We don't want it. And they have really done an amazing job of pivoting through all of that.
Well, and I would say they were started as a DVD sales company. They didn't go to the subscription model until after that. And they realized that people weren't going to buy DVDs in the mail. And that's when they started experimenting with the subscription, X number of DVDs per month for a flat rate. Because we all remember Blockbuster, right? And the late fees and the bad customer experience when you'd go in and they'd say you have a $25 late fee because this wasn't returned on time. So they got rid of all of that. And you absolutely agree with you. They were able to pivot, one, to experiment, which requires risk taking, which again is kind of back to my thesis that the biggest risk is not taking enough risk, especially when new technology comes along. And DVDs at that time were brand new. They originally started mailing VHS tapes, if you remember the Betamax and all those. And then DVDs came out, they were flat. And they actually experimented mailing those DVDs to see if they would survive the post office. Obviously they did. And in fact, you see a red envelope back there, and they just late last year shut down that subscription service because now they're all in the streaming service. But that, again, if you remember Netflix in the early days, their streaming service was awful. Internet was slow. It buffered. And it wasn't a great experience. But what do we know? The broadband speed continues to get faster and faster and faster. I now have at my house fiber optic with 1 gig up and down. Huge change from those early days.
That is a massive change. And I remember in the early days, I was like, how in the world can you mail a DVD and not have the post office break it? Because they didn't even put it in bubble wrap.
No,
it was just literally
flat
in a piece of paper.
Well, it was flat. It was in it had a plastic cover to it, so that was the protection. But it was a flat envelope. Absolutely.
But then they got rid of the plastic, didn't they? Didn't they just put it in the paper sleeve?
Put it in the paper.
Yeah.
Yep.
And they figure, well, if you do the odds, if 1 out of 20 break, it's probably cheaper than the extra mailing cost and the other stuff.
And I remember over the years sending back something that had a CD that had broken, and they just replaced it. No questions asked. Send another one. So yes. And then so I'll continue the Netflix story just one more time, one more aspect of it. When we talk about content development at Netflix, what's really interesting to me is when they started, one, they realized they needed their own content, not licensing others. So they started creating their own content. And most people don't remember today what their very first serialized show was on Netflix.
No clue.
It was House of Cards. And what they did when they released the show is they looked at their analytics because they knew what people watched and how long. And what they realized is people watch one episode after another, binge watch.
Yeah.
And so with House of Cards, they did something that no one else had ever done before. They released all 13 episodes on the same day. So you could literally spend the weekend and go through every episode. Whereas even today, Apple, Paramount, some of the other streaming services release an episode a week because that's the traditional or the legacy TV model, because you have to bring people back. They understood what their customers want and they wanted to binge watch. So they put them all out there. And again,
I didn't even know stuff was released a week at a time still. I don't watch enough TV to notice that. Yeah, it's been a long time.
And to me, it's a great example, again, of any business, big or small, understanding their customer and what your customer wants, not what you think you need to do. Because, and again, I'm going to quote Jeff Bezos at Amazon, if it's good for the customer, it'll eventually be good for Amazon. And that mindset is not the mindset that most business owners have today.
Well, they don't even know what their customers want. That's a whole nother story.
That is a whole nother story.
You've said it a couple of times. The biggest risk is not taking risks. So let's dive into that. What do you mean by that?
Well, honestly, with any company, so back to the conversation we had about Kodak, I do agree with you that as businesses scale, they get more risk averse because they have something that's successful. That's why they're able to scale. So they start protecting what got them there, not looking at what's next. And I think that was the flaw at Kodak. They saw digital camera, but couldn't project that would replace physical film and chemical and developing. And so they waited too long, and then they couldn't get out of the hole. So back to that innovator's dilemma. And I also say, and let me finish this first thought. When I say risk taking, part of that is experimenting. And so if businesses aren't experimenting with what's new, they're going to be behind. And if you experiment and have an experimentation mindset, you're going to fail. So the corollary side to that is you've got to encourage your employees to experiment and be willing to suffer failures to get to that next big idea that's going to propel you to the next phase of your organization. And again, honestly, I don't think size here matters. Now, a bigger company might have more resources, but it's more of a mindset than it is just money.
And I agree with that. I think Kodak was probably at the cusp of what I talk about as a massive generational change. Mm-hmm. So what I mean about that is if you think about when we were young, the world didn't change that quickly, right? Things were still the same as they were 30 or 40 years ago. And what I've noticed in probably the last 40 years is the rate of change has accelerated so fast that either you're keeping up or you're left behind. And it's constant now. And at least for our generation, I don't think we were taught that. You bought things and you kept them forever. Today, everything is throwaway.
Yes.
And it's designed for that,
Yes, it is.
Massive, massive shift. So what inspired you to write the book, The Bezos Letters, 14 Principles to Grow Your Business Like Amazon?
All the things we talked about, as I said, looking at companies that once successful, no longer here, looking at companies that continue to be successful, what's the difference? And obviously, I looked at all kinds of different companies, some of which we've talked about. And I looked at Amazon as one of the examples of a company that continues to be successful. And I wanted to understand better why. What is it that they did that's different? And I came across in my research the letters to shareholders that Jeff Bezos wrote. So Amazon went public in 1997. His first letter to shareholders was published in April of 1998. That was a typical time period. And he wrote a letter every year up until 2020, when he stepped down as CEO and became executive chairman. So at the time I wrote the book, he had written through the 2018 letter. So 20 different letters. And I literally sat down, and I'd read one or two letters here and there when they came out and found them interesting. But I got all of them that had been published and read through them as a narrative, as a book, about 48,000 words. And what I realized doing that was that there were threads of thoughts that went through the letters. And Bezos did it, and for Amazon, did what is typical in a shareholder letter, what the company did, milestones they made, how great they are, etc. He did some of that. But he actually did more of how they did it. What were the mindsets? What ended up for me being the principles that Amazon employed in order to continue to accelerate their growth? And so that's why I call them growth principles. And I came up with 14 of principles. I organized them into what I call 4 cycles: test, build, accelerate, and scale. And I believe every business, large or small, is going through those cycles, testing a new product, new idea, new platform, new service, figuring out, is it going to work or not? That's where the experimentation is there. Building on the success, accelerating that success, and then scaling to a bigger company. And then this could be another round trip through the 4 cycles for a department, a product, a region, a division. So just a way to think about the different principles and how they can apply.
And it's true, every company goes through this. And sometimes, it's funny as I think about that, sometimes you're ahead of the curve.
Mm-hmm.
So we were talking about DVDs. Before the DVD was the laser disc, and it didn't really come to be.
Yeah, didn't take off. Yeah, you're right.
Didn't take off. And sometimes you're just ahead of the curve, and sometimes,
right,
well, you could end up behind the curve. So, and I don't know how much you've looked at Apple. I know Apple is so successful today at bringing in cash. But when I look at Apple, I'm like, what have you done for me lately?
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't think they have done anything innovative in a long time.
Yeah, I agree. And, certainly the Apple fan people will argue with us on that. And I think part of what, so Apple is an example of Jobs coming back. And one of the first things he did when he came back as interim CEO is he cut, I don't remember now the number, a number of like 15 or 20 products, and then concentrated on 4 different products. And so he brought the scope of what they were doing down so they could focus more on it. I would also say Apple does focus on the customer experience. And so, that's core to what they do, or at least what they try and do. And I think the third thing is they are obsessive about controlling hardware and software. And there are definitely some advantages there, but there's some disadvantages. But I don't know if we want to talk about that, but they control the entire ecosystem, which makes everything that's Apple work well together.
I will say they are phenomenal at making everything work together. What I have found so unbelievably annoying is the fact that they've taken away features that were already there that they removed that make my life unbelievably a pain.
Yeah.
Like a simple one is I've got, when I have a computer open, I got 50 tabs open, and on my phone, I've probably got 75 apps. I used to be able to go in on the computer, move all my apps around, and then arrange them in a way that was simple and easy to use. They don't allow you to do that anymore.
I agree with you. It is so irritating because I organize my apps, right? So I can find them. Now, some people would argue, you just search for it. Why do you even need to organize them? Well,
because it's the customer experience.
That's what I want. And I do joke with people so I have an iPhone. My wife has an iPhone. I can't use her iPhone because she has the apps in all the wrong places. So I can't find anything because it's personal to me. I agree with you. That's really irritating.
But at the same point, if I look at the latest iPhone and I go compare it to the iPhone 3, granted, it's faster, the camera's better, it might have a longer battery life, but there's nothing revolutionarily different about it over these past, I don't know, 15, 16 years. And even because I bought the first iPad and I have a relatively new iPad, but if I put them side by side,
you can't tell much difference.
I can't tell much difference other than, this one works faster because I swear they throttle the old one, but I don't know if that's true. No. The one thing they've done is they've obsolete their products.
Yes.
So you can't get support. So you're almost forced to do that. I don't know how much longer they're going to be able to survive if somebody comes along and changes something.
Well, and I think, given history, it's going to have, it could take 20 years. But if they start getting into that cycle where they just protect what they have and not look at doing whatever new might be, I think it almost becomes inevitable that they go the way of the other companies that have done the same thing. And I think that's the idea of protecting the iPhone, protecting the Mac, protecting the iPad, and incremental improvements. And frankly, that's what I call innovation. And I think what's missing in companies today is invention. Experimentation allows you to invent something new on behalf of the customer, which then gives you the chance to innovate it further. But I think companies are so focused on being innovative, they've lost the spark of invention.
Today's episode is sponsored by Profit Answer Man Podcast. Did you know that most small business owners hate looking at their financials? It's one reason they may struggle with business success. The Profit Answer Man podcast helps them ensure they are profitable and can pay their employees and weather the storms we all have to face. It's built on the Profit First methodology of pay yourself first. The Profit Answer Man podcast is a must-listen to for every small business owner and anyone who wants to help them survive and thrive. Check it out on your favorite listening platform.
It's funny because for the longest time, and Elon did this, I'm like, I wish they would take the iPad, let me plug it into the front of my car and let it run my car. Like, I don't want all these stupid buttons, just throw. And then Elon, literally, what he did was he stuck an iPad in a Tesla and here's your thing. And you let everything run off of
That's
that.
right.
And I'm like, it just amazed me that it took Elon breaking the mold to get all these other people to follow. And there's another classic example of a company that I see a massive risk in, because everyone is talking about the fact that electric is not the best way to go forward in the sense that we don't have the supply grid, the generation, and that hydrogen's probably the better option. And what you're seeing now in the marketplace is electric cars from all these other manufacturers are massively being discounted. Not to mention, if you own a Tesla, you've got the same problem that you do when you own an Apple. You're locked into an ecosystem. And with a car, God forbid they make it obsolete.
Absolutely. Well, and I think Elon's interesting. He really has invented. I mean, SpaceX, the Teslas, and some work well, some don't. The Boring Company. I mean, all of these kind of crazy ideas that he has been at least successful in some of them, getting them, implemented. Whether that turns into long-term success, I don't know. And I tend to agree with you on electric. I think I've rented a couple of Tesla cars. I thought I wanted one, and I realized I don't, because I actually think they're very uncomfortable. And hearing about the maintenance, and I mean, there are other things that industry hasn't worked out yet. and charging anxiety and all of those different things. And our grid currently is just not, I don't believe it's able to support the move to 100% electric everything.
And I went and drove a Model Y
Mhm.
because that's what I was pretty much thinking of getting. And then I came to realize something. I wanted the Sport Y because if you're going to buy a Tesla, you want it to go fast, right? The problem is the Sport Y delivered to me in the Northeast comes with summer tires.
Oh,
So the moment I bought it, I would have to spend $2,000 something to put winter tires or all seasons on it. And the second part, I was like, you know what? This car is not luxurious.
right.
And so I ended up buying the BMW, and I have dual power. So it's electric around town
Yep.
and gas on the road. And I have no anxiety because when the electric stops working, the gas, I don't even notice. Oh, I ran out of battery, and off I go, and I can drive. And
Exactly. Yep.
it works like a champ.
Yep.
So what is the difference between innovation and invention?
The way I think about it and describe it is invention is doing something new. Again, I'll talk a little bit about Amazon. Amazon has an experimentation mindset, and that's one of the things that Bezos talks a lot about in the letters. And so in the test cycle, my first principle is encourage successful failure, meaning if you experiment, you're going to fail. So you actually need to encourage experimentation and be willing to suffer the failures and not punish employees for failures. And that's a key shift for most businesses. But think about even early on, again, late 90s, early 2000s, internet was gaining in popularity. More and more people were on it, which is why Bezos came up with this idea of having a bookstore with literally unlimited shelf space that you could buy any book published in the world and get it mailed to you at the time. But one of the big problems was with the internet is you had to put in all your information every time. You had to put in the shipping address, you had to put in the credit card information, you had to, nobody stored it. Amazon invented one-click shopping, and it was so unique, they actually received a patent on that process. Now, we take it for granted today, but at the time, it was revolutionary because now a customer could put all their information in and literally clicking the button, they could buy because all the information was already there and stored there securely. And talk about Apple. Apple ended up licensing the technology from Amazon to have that same experience on their website. Barnes & Noble tried to duplicate it. Amazon sued them for patent infringement, and Amazon won. That patent ran out several years ago. But again, that's the idea. And I could keep going. I mean, think about, what do I want to say? Think about Prime, early 2000s. Another big customer friction was getting to that last page before you click place my order and seeing shipping costs that now made your purchase that much more expensive. So friction of abandoning your shopping cart. Bezos came up with the idea, let's pay for 2-day free shipping. Crazy idea. His team, senior leadership team at Amazon, thought it was crazy. Now, you think about kind of what you talk about a lot, which is profit. How do you get profit? How do you keep profit? They're saying we can't afford, that'll cut into our margins so much that we can't afford to pay for shipping. And Bezos had a intuitive feeling, understanding that if people didn't have to pay for shipping, they would buy more. And so he literally pushed it through over a lot of objections, and they tested it first. And they tried different things. They tried, free shipping with $25 or more in your cart, and all of that. They eventually came around with Prime, added a subscription service, or subscription price to it, and now you could get 2 free day shipping on virtually any kind of product that you wanted to buy on Amazon. And studies kind of subsequent to that implementation show that Prime members at Amazon spend twice as much on average than non-Prime members. Because why? It's easy. And even my wife and I think lots of people now, we'll actually debate, do we want to go to the store or should we just order it on Amazon because we can have it here? Actually, today, where we live in Nashville, a lot of times it's within 4 hours or that same day or tomorrow morning before 7, because shipping has become so much better at Amazon. So they invented that process.
And they're a shipping company now.
I call them a logistics company. Yes, they are.
And they've done a wonderful job with that. And I watched Bezos' film on how he started Amazon. Uh-huh. It was incredible to watch the backstory of how he thought through picking a business to build with intention. Because most people just go out, well, I want to do this and sell it, instead of actually taking the time to reverse engineer everything to make it work for what he wanted to do and how he built it. And then I know, and you can probably talk to this, it's that long-term thinking, which most businesses are focused on the quarter,
correct,
not on long-term growth, which is why I think Warren Buffett does so well. He doesn't care about the quarter. He's looking at a lifetime of, forward thinking. And the other thing that I loved about Amazon is, again, they built a shipping company to solve a problem. They built AWS to solve a problem. They build everything they need to solve their own problems, and then they sell that to everybody.
Exactly. When AWS is such a great example of that, they were having significant problems internally just building and keeping up with what needed to be built and created, et cetera. And so AWS was internal, as you said, initially, and then they realized that, hey, there are other developers out there that have the same problems we do. They might want to be able to utilize our compute services to build their business. And that's where AWS started and has grown significantly and is a major profit center for them.
Interesting. Since you're so much of a futurist in the world of technology, everybody's freaking out about AI right now. I use it a ton to help me achieve what I want to do. What are you seeing? Because I think it's going to be a game changer for how people Google. Mm-hmm. And so they are now at massive risk.
So that's a big topic. Let me give you a couple of thoughts. One is I really do believe that, and I'm a bit more specific. I call it the generative AI. So maybe a subset. General artificial intelligence, I don't think we'll see for quite a while. I don't believe, I'm not scared of it. I don't believe it's going to take over the world. I don't believe silicon can become biological. Bottom line. I think it's a technology that we are seeing the very early stages of. And that typical hype cycle is certainly in full force here. We kind of had the hype over the last year, really high stuff. It's dropping off somewhat. Now we're starting to see, okay, what are the actual use cases? How can it help a business with some of the mundane stuff that they hire people to do? What can be done? For insurance agents, I just completed a 4-part webinar series on generative AI for independent insurance agents. And it was 4 parts because I couldn't cram it all into one in 4-hour parts. So I talked about kind of background, general information first. I talked about content development second. I talked about business intelligence third. And I talked about image, audio, and video fourth. And I think all of those different areas are being developed. And the one phrase I kept saying over and over again, this technology is the worst that it's ever going to be today. And it's getting better and better. And you talked earlier about the speed of change. It's happening fast. And there will be examples. I mean, I think technology is neutral. I think how people use it is not. So there will be bad actors, just like there are bad actors on the internet. And we have phishing scams and, cyber attacks and all those kinds of things absolutely will be part of it. And as we learn how to use it, we'll learn how to deal with those problems. So I'm very bullish. I'm very bullish on it.
We shall see. And what I remember from going through the 2000 tech bubble is the people who led it and had the biggest amount of money coming in were not the ones who persisted. Like AOL's gone, At Home gone, many of the early
gone. I mean, yeah, gone. You can the whole litany, right?
Netscape.
Well, and I think the issue there, and I think similar now because I see some correlations or similarities. The issue there was they didn't have a business model that was going to work. It's just the more people we have, the more money we make, but it's free. Okay, what is the business model there? I think with what we're seeing today, we're seeing all these companies starting up with AI in their name that don't really have a business model, and they're relying on 4, maybe 5 other large language models: OpenAI, Anthropic, Microsoft with OpenAI, Google a little bit, but they're building their businesses on another platform they don't own or control, which just by its nature is problematic.
And we already know that with people who built businesses on Facebook or on Instagram, like that, it can disappear.
One thing changes and their business is gone.
And I see that with people who built their businesses on Amazon. Because if you are a e-com business and you're a Me Too, it's a massive struggle because Amazon takes such a large cut that it becomes almost impossible to run an e-com business unless you are unique and different.
And let me talk a little bit about Amazon taking such a large cut. How much would it cost a small business to build a website like Amazon, to build the logistics network like Amazon? They would never be able to do that. So, again, what's fair, it's sort of what the market will bear in some cases. And certainly there's lots of talk now about Amazon, taking too much or, not supporting the third-party marketplace, et cetera. But they made a big bet on that early on. Another example of inventing something new. Who in their right mind would let their competitors on their own website to sell? But again, Bezos said, if it's better for the customer, it'll be better for us eventually. And they build services that others can't. They build the infrastructure that others can't. So, yes, to some extent, and they need to be held accountable if they're doing something not right. And these businesses wouldn't even have the opportunity otherwise.
And it always amazes me how Sears fell apart because they had technology early on. I could walk into Sears and I'm like, I need a part for my lawnmower, and they could go into their computer and they'd know all the lawnmowers I bought. And they knew who I was and how I purchased and what I was doing. And yet they did nothing with that data.
Right.
And they were the original mail order company.
I was just going to say that. They created the mail order business before, internet and all of that. And they successfully transitioned from that to physical retail stores. They didn't transition from physical retail stores to online stores. And, we could talk about all the potential reasons why, but that's just another example of not taking enough risks and ultimately that being your biggest problem.
So I know one of the principles I think that came out throughout the book constantly is every day is day one.
It is.
It's that beginner mentality.
Yep. So it's one of my favorite. I mean, again, there are 14 principles, and part of what I want to say is the principles stand on their own and they interact with one another. And this one is absolutely true. So it's my principle number 14. It's in the scale, the final cycle. And it started with that first 1997 letter and Bezos' mindset at that time and actually throughout his career as CEO. And it's this, here's what he wrote. He said, it's day one for the internet. Now remember, this is 1997, and it really was, right? Nobody really knew at that point what the internet was going to be. Day one for the internet and for Amazon.com if we execute well. So that was kind of that first piece. And then every subsequent letter that he wrote, two things. One is he always attached that original 1997 letter because it had three different sections, all very foundational to Amazon. And he always referenced back to that letter. And the second thing is, starting with 1998, he had some form or version of the phrase, "It's still day one. Even with all of the challenges we face, it's still day one." And again, it's that mindset of when you walk into your business, big or small, every morning, do you walk in as if it was your first day of a new business? You still have that excitement and that desire to serve customers and that feeling that this is going to be built into something great. And so, and then kind of the subsequent part of that is in 2016, he was at an all hands meeting in Seattle, a couple thousand employees, regular occurrence quarterly, went over the company and different initiatives, and then always had a Q&A section at the end. And so employees would write down their questions. So we looked at his note cards, and the next question was, "Jeff, what is day two like?" Well, laughter rumbled kind of through the audience. And he said, "I think I can answer this question." And here's what he said. Day two is stasis, followed by irrelevance, followed by excruciating, painful decline, followed by death. And then he paused and ended with, "That's why it's always day one." Now, I want people to go back to what we talked about earlier between Kodak and Sears, maybe Apple at some point. Are they in that day two cycle? Are they, irrelevance, all of that? In his shareholder letter, he told this story and he added this piece to it. He said, "I'm more interested in how you defend against a day two mindset." And he said there were four things: customer obsession, a skeptical view of proxies. So that for Bezos, that means processes and procedures that no longer serve the purpose they were originally designed to serve, which is the customer. So skeptical view of proxies, eager adoption of external trends. And he even identified in 2016 machine learning as one of those external trends, which I find really interesting. And then finally, high velocity decision making, meaning when a company gets bigger, they tend to add layers of bureaucracy to the decision making process. And at Amazon, they fight against that. They try and continue to keep decision making at the lowest level possible that is capable of making a good decision.
And I know when it comes to decision making, I believe they use two different categories.
Correct.
The type of decision that it's easy to undo, and then they don't worry about those. And then the type of decision that becomes very hard to undo, they really are careful about those. And maybe you can say that more eloquently than me.
Well, the way he describes it is type 1 and type 2 decisions, and he describes it as doors. And a type 1 decision is, as you described, a kind of bet the company type decision, really big, consequential, maybe a merger, maybe something else, maybe opening a new headquarters. And he said those decisions should be made slowly, carefully, with as much information as you can gather, because they're hard to reverse. That's the reason. And those need to be pushed up to higher capable people. Type 2 decisions, on the other hand, are more easily reversible. And those need to be kept as low as possible and with only 70% of the information you wish you had. So you can't wait for all the information because that just slows down the decision-making process. And when you slow down the decision-making process, you slow down growth and you slow down. And so, again, they keep bureaucracy as much as possible out of the organizational structure. And I think that's, again, one of the reasons they have continued to be successful really in multiple different industries.
And so that was my question to you. Has that changed? Are they still playing day one, or is it starting to get nightfall at Amazon for day one?
So I think they would answer that question. Andy Jassy at all. I think they would answer that question as yes, we are. I think there are some indications that maybe not as much as they did in the past. And certainly the CEO transition from Jeff Bezos to Andy Jassy. Andy Jassy was CEO at AWS, so deep history at Amazon. Seems to be doing a good job. But you're not the only one to ask that question. I would say that. There are others saying, is Amazon starting to shift into more of a day two mindset? And maybe that's the case. Bezos said many years ago now that it's likely Amazon will go out of business one day and be a day two company. He said, I hope I'm long gone by then, but that's the reality of businesses.
It is the reality of businesses. And it's funny because my son had a choice between an offer from Amazon and an offer from one of the other big guys. Mm-hmm. And I told him hands down, go to the other one.
Yeah.
And I think it was more because of the way Amazon treats its people. Like, it's funny that where he went, they had chefs and cooks to make all his meals when he was working. At Amazon, they hand out bananas,
right,
which I think is hilarious. This is how they treat their people. It's like, wait a minute, you're almost making the point that you've got monkeys working for you.
Yeah.
And I was like, culturally, I think the other place is going to be a better culture for you.
Better fit, better culture. That absolutely could be. Yep.
Well, time will tell.
That's so very true. And I certainly will be paying attention.
But at the end of the day, I think really some key takeaways, for people who own businesses is he was so intentional. He spent a ton of time figuring out what to build. And then he has just constantly been willing to try, shift, change, and figure out how to do it. And he built it on a shoestring budget, I believe, in the beginning.
He did.
So you don't need more money. You have to figure out how to kind of be more resourceful and how to be able to do that. And I think Amazon is one of the few tech companies, I think, that quickly went to profitability, though, because a lot of them seem to go like Tesla and Airbnb and some of these, they seem to go forever before they're actually profitable. I know it did take them a while.
It did take them a while initially because they were reinvesting everything back into fulfillment centers and warehouses and, logistics and all of those kinds of things. But eventually, yes. And yes, they became very profitable. Their stock price grew significantly. All of those indicators, very much so.
Truly interesting.
It's time to learn the secrets of life.
What's your secret to living an abundant life?
Gratitude.
That's our number one answer.
Is it? Interesting.
It literally seems to, when I ask this question, I would say more than 50% of the time, that's the answer we get.
That's interesting. Yeah. That tells you something right there. Sorry, I interrupted. But
it does. No, well, you know what? There's actually psychology studies that say it is better to give than to receive. And they actually do experiments where they hand out money to everyone in the audience and they go, now go give the money away. Yeah. And people feel better giving than they do receiving. Yeah. And so that's kind of what gratitude is the ability to give. Mm-hmm. What did you learn later in life that you wish you would have learned sooner?
Couple things come to mind. Probably the one I'm going to pick is persistence.
I'm a big fan of compounding. And compounding is persistence in action.
Yes, that's true.
And when you just keep showing up, either way, it goes up and down, right? Kodak compounded down, Sears compounded down, Amazon, Apple compounded up, and maybe one day they'll switch.
Yep, exactly. Interesting.
If you were to give an 18-year-old one specific piece of wisdom, what would it be?
Experiment and don't be afraid of failure. Or to put it in one, don't be afraid of failure.
It's funny because school teaches the opposite.
Yes. They
don't teach money either.
Yes, exactly. Hence some of our student loan problems, right?
Well, because, honestly, they took the Amazon model. Make it easy to borrow a couple
Yep.
$100,000 and don't even worry about the
That's
payment.
right.
Click here. Yeah, that's funny. If people would like to learn more about the book and learn more about you, what's the best place for them to do that?
So the book is available on Amazon. No shock there. And the more information about the book is at thebezosletters.com website. And then you can contact me through that website or through LinkedIn, which is my primary social platform. And if you are listening to this, want to connect with me, just let me know, and I'll be happy to do that.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Rocky, thanks so much for having me.
Do you live like every day is day one, trying something new, not being the smartest person in the room, checking out a new skill or upping the one you have? We're living in an era where health span is increasing. As for me, I'm going to continue doing this into my 70s and 80s and maybe even longer because it's fun and what I love, and I'm constantly learning something new. What about you? Are you living in alignment with what you love to do? By the way, if you know someone who would enjoy this episode, would you do me a favor? Would you share it with them? I'd appreciate that. Next week, we've got Elaine Boyd on to talk about living in alignment with who you are. Thanks for listening. Have an abundant week.